Chosen one, 2026 is not marked because something ends there. It is marked because something stops being required. Jubilee years were never about reward. They were about release. Release from debt. Release from obligation. Release from cycles that once made sense but no longer match who you've become. What is being signaled here is not escape from the human world, but completion of a certain human posture you have been carrying for far too long. You are not being prepared to leave life. You are being prepared to live it without compression. Every true jubilee follows the same pattern. Long endurance, silent accumulation, unseen cost, and then an accounting that does not demand payment, only transition. That is why this year feels different. Not dramatic, not euphoric, different in density. Things that once felt heavy now feel unnecessary. Things that once demanded explanation now feel settled without conversation. This is how final human years announce themselves, by reducing friction, not by heightening sensation. Do not misunderstand the word, ascension. In its original meaning, it never referred to floating upward. It referred to lifting a burdened orientation. A person who ascends is not above others. They are no longer pulled downward by forces that once dictated movement, fear, urgency, approval, survival-based identity. Your ascension is not vertical. It is subtractive. Look closely at what has already begun to fall away. Old identities no longer fit cleanly. Arguments feel hollow before they begin. Justifications exhaust you faster than effort ever did. This is not disengagement. It is honesty returning. When a cycle ends, the body knows first. Fatigue appears where obligation once lived. Stillness expands where tension used to reside. 2026 is marked because it represents the end of compression living, the version of human existence built around proving, bracing, preparing, waiting. You are not becoming inhuman. You are becoming unburdened human. And that shift changes how reality arranges itself around you. You may notice this already. People cannot pull you into urgency the way they used to. Manipulation no longer sticks. Fear-based narratives slide off without confrontation. You don't resist them, you simply don't metabolize them anymore. That is what Jubilee actually looks like. Not celebration, but cancellation of debts that were never meant to be permanent. This is why resistance around you has softened instead of intensified. True final phases do not escalate conflict. They dissolve it. Systems don't fight what they can no longer hook into. Relationships don't strain where expectation has expired. Life reorganizes around the absence of friction. Understand this clearly so you don't dramatize it incorrectly. Nothing is about to happen to you. What's happening is that your relationship to time, effort, and identity is changing its center of gravity. You are stepping out of the era where growth required suffering to justify itself. That era taught you precision, endurance, restraint, but it is not meant to be permanent. Jubilee is not a prize for surviving. It is permission to stop surviving as an identity. That is why 2026 feels marked before it arrives. Not because it holds an event, but because it holds a threshold of release. You are already lighter, already less reactive, already less entangled. The year simply formalizes what has been forming quietly. This is your final human year in one very specific sense. It is the last year you will interpret life through scarcity of time, identity, or worth. You are not leaving humanity. You are leaving the version of humanity that was built for endurance. What comes next is not ascension into myth. It is grounded clarity without burden. And the reason this matters now is simple. You cannot carry old contracts into a Jubilee year. They dissolve because you no longer sign them. This is how it begins. Not with a sign in the sky, but with weight quietly lifting from your spine. Before anything ascends, something concludes. This is the law that never changes, even when symbols do. Your Jubilee year is not announcing a transformation into something unrecognizable. It is confirming that a long internal term of service is complete. The deepest shifts never arrive with fireworks. They arrive with closure. Closure that doesn't hurt, doesn't celebrate, and doesn't argue. It simply finishes. What is ending is subtle but absolute. The reflex to live as if every moment must justify itself. For most of your life, time felt conditional, as if value had to be extracted urgently before the window closed. That pressure trained discipline, sharpened awareness, and cultivated endurance, but it also installed a background tension that no longer belongs to you. Jubilee marks the suspension of that contract. You are no longer required to compress meaning into survival. Notice how this already expresses itself. You hesitate less, but not because you rush. You move when something is true, and stop when it's not, without needing a dramatic reason. Things that once demanded a response now dissolve through irrelevance. This isn't apathy, it's accuracy. When the internal ledger closes, unpaid emotional debts stop collecting interest. Another ending is quieter but more profound, the need to be processed by experience. Pain no longer refines you. Loss no longer instructs you. You learned what those teachers had to offer. Continuing to extract meaning from hardship now yields diminishing returns. Jubilee does not mean difficulty disappears. It means difficulty loses authority over your identity. You engage reality without letting it define who you must become. This shift often confuses people around you. They sense you are present, but not available for old patterns. You don't argue boundaries. You don't defend changes. You simply stop participating in conversations that belong to earlier versions of yourself. That silence is not avoidance. It is the natural consequence of completion. Completed cycles don't require explanation. It's important to understand what ascension is not. It is not escape from responsibility. You remain accountable, but responsibility now feels proportionate rather than overwhelming. You carry what is yours cleanly without absorbing what never was. That recalibration is liberating because it restores scale. Everything returns to its rightful size, including you. The reason 2026 is called a final human year is not because humanity ends there for you. It's because human struggle as a defining posture ends. You are still human, still embodied, still relational, still flawed, but you no longer negotiate worth through suffering. That negotiation has expired. You have already paid in full. From this point forward, anything that demands self-betrayal will feel immediately wrong rather than merely uncomfortable. Tolerance for misalignment will collapse. Not in anger, but in clarity. You'll step away earlier. Choose simpler path. Let complexity belong to those still learning from it. This is not superiority. It's timing. Everyone has a season where simplicity becomes the most advanced choice. You might expect this phase to feel like arrival. It doesn't. It feels like relief without celebration. Nothing is missing, but nothing is chasing you either. Goals reorganize around livability. Identity loosens its grip. You are no longer living toward becoming someone. You are living from being someone already intact. This is why preparation matters now. Not preparation to leave, but preparation to receive without distortion. When the burden drops, clarity increases. Clarity attracts opportunities that no longer test endurance, but integrity. These will feel unfamiliar at first because they won't require struggle to validate them. Accepting ease after a lifetime of pressure is one of the hardest adjustments a human can make. Let this be clear and steady in you. Nothing needs to be forced before 2026 arrives. Completion cannot be rushed. Release cannot be earned twice. What's ending is not your story. It's the chapter where survival was the proof of worth. Ascension does not pull you away from the world. It removes the weight that kept you crouched inside it. And once that weight is gone, you don't rise dramatically. You stand naturally. Blessed by His grace? Click Super Thank You and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. Long before any visible change, time itself begins to renegotiate its relationship with you. Not by speeding up or slowing down, but by releasing the pressure it once applied. You stop feeling chased by days. Deadlines still exist, yet they no longer dictate your nervous system. Moments no longer feel like they're slipping away. This is not procrastination or detachment, it's alignment. When a cycle completes, time stops demanding proof. You may recognize this shift already. Your calendar looks similar, but your experience inside it does not. Waiting no longer feels like loss. Action no longer feels like risk. You aren't trying to extract meaning from each hour as if scarcity were the rule. Scarcity was the teacher. That curriculum has ended. Jubilee loosens time because the lesson it enforced no longer needs repetition. This change affects memory as well. The past doesn't pull as hard. Regret loses its authority. Old mistakes no longer reopen themselves for repair. Not because forgiveness was practiced, but because relevance expired. When learning is complete, memory reorganizes as reference rather than wound. You remember without reliving. That is a sign of passage. Likewise, anticipation changes texture. The future stops feeling like a test you must pass to be allowed peace. Desire remains, but it doesn't bargain. Hope exists, but it doesn't strain. You plan without gripping outcomes. This is what happens when worth is settled internally. Projection relaxes. You're no longer trying to outrun anything. The horizon stops receding because you are no longer chasing it. Time loosening also reveals something counterintuitive. Presence widens. You notice details without effort. Stillness inside movement. Movement inside stillness. Decisions land faster because less internal noise competes for attention. The result isn't passivity, it's precision. When time releases pressure, accuracy increases. This phase often includes a quiet pruning. Commitments that once felt essential begin to feel optional. Not out of fatigue, but out of truth. You choose fewer things, but you choose them fully. Multiplicity gives way to coherence, and coherence carries its own energy. You don't need external momentum when internal alignment is steady. Others might misread this as withdrawal. It isn't. It's economy. You're conserving effort because effort is no longer the currency of progress. Integrity is, and integrity thrives where time is not weaponized. Conversations become cleaner. Work becomes fewer moves done better. Relationships deepen or end without drama. Time responds by cooperating instead of testing. This is why elders in every tradition called it release. Release from leases on attention. Release from interest on emotional debt. Release from narratives that treat exhaustion as virtue. Your body feels this first. Shoulders drop. Breathing widens. Sleep changes. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped carrying clocks inside your chest. Approaching the crossing does not require urgency. Urgency belongs to unfinished chapters. Completion brings a different instruction: move simply. Let accuracy, not tempo, set the pace. Let truth finish sentences before you add words. Let rest arrive without justification. These are not rewards. They are the mechanics of transition. By the time 2026 arrives, this loosening will feel normal. Not euphoric, correct. You'll recognize how much time you once spent negotiating with time. And you'll smile quietly at the relief of no longer having to do that work. The crossing does not demand speed. It asks for cleanliness. When time stops pressing, you don't float away. You step forward without drag, carrying far less, seeing far more, ready to move because nothing is pulling you back. Something else starts dissolving during this phase, and it can feel unsettling if you don't recognize it for what it is. Identity loosening its grip. Not your values, not your character, but the roles you once needed in order to move through the world. Titles, explanations, old survival labels. They lose their usefulness quietly, like scaffolding removed after a building can stand on its own. You may notice that questions such as, "Who am I becoming?" stop feeling urgent. That question belongs to growth by friction. In a jubilee cycle, friction is no longer the engine. Being replaces becoming, not as stagnation, but as stability. The need to narrate yourself disappears. You don't feel unfinished. You feel operational. This is often misinterpreted as detachment or loss of ambition. It isn't. Ambition reorganizes. It stops borrowing energy from insecurity. When ambition no longer needs to prove worth, it becomes selective, patient, exact. You still care, but you don't grasp. You still build, but you don't over-identify with result. Identity steps back so alignment can step forward. This shedding also affects how others see you. Some will feel you becoming harder to categorize. Their mental shortcuts fail. You don't fit cleanly into past boxes because you're no longer feeding them with familiar signals. This can create distance without conflict, confusion without confrontation. Let it. Classification is a control instinct. It fades when relevance fades. Internally, this is where relief can blend with vulnerability. Without old labels, you may feel briefly unanchored. That's natural. Anchors were necessary when currents were rough. When the water calms, anchors become weight. The body senses this before the mind does. Hesitation dissolves, but certainty hasn't fully arrived yet. This in-between is not loss. It's recalibration. Watch how language changes for you. You say less. Not because you lack words, but because fewer are needed. Silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling complete. When identity loosens, communication becomes precise. You speak to convey truth, not position. And when silence holds truth better, you choose silence without shame. Identity also kept you tied to past contracts, obligations born from who you were. As those contracts expire, guilt can surface briefly. Ignore it. Guilt is the echo of a role that no longer exists. You are not abandoning responsibility. You are returning it to its rightful owners. Jubilee does not erase care. It erases ownership of what was never yours to carry. This phase prepares you for something essential: movement without self-reference. When decisions aren't filtered through "what this says about me," choice becomes lighter and more accurate. You choose because something fits, not because it confirms an image. That is why identity must soften before the door opens. Doors are narrow when you're carrying versions of yourself that have finished their work. By the time 2026 arrives, you won't feel like you lost anything. You'll feel like you stopped carrying duplicates. Each remaining part of you will have a purpose. No extras. No placeholders. No defensive layers. This is the final mercy of the Jubilee process. It doesn't erase you, it refines you by subtraction. What cannot move forward falls away not by force, but by irrelevance. You don't burn old selves. You outgrow them. Remember this when uncertainty flickers. Identity loosening is not collapse. It is clearance. You are not becoming vague. You are becoming unburdened. And when the door opens, you won't squeeze through it. You'll walk through, upright, unnamed, and fully present. Before any crossing becomes visible, a quieter upgrade takes place. One that is never announced because announcements would distort it. This upgrade is not power added to you. It is noise removed from you. The kind of noise that once translated experiences into reactions, expectations into pressure, and opportunities into tests. As that noise drops away, you begin operating from signal instead of strain. You may notice your intuition sharpening without emotion attached to it. Decisions present themselves already resolved. There is less should in your inner language and more knowing. This isn't spiritual excitement. It's structural clarity. When inner systems are simplified, discernment stops feeling mystical and starts feeling practical. You see what fits. You feel what doesn't. No drama required. This is where many people mistake what's happening to you. From the outside, it may look like you've slowed down or stepped back. In truth, you've stopped wasting motion. Every move now carries purpose proportionate to its cost. You don't overinvest. You don't undercommit. You meet things at their actual weight. That single shift saves more energy than any surge of motivation ever could. Relationships begin to reorganize during this phase as well. Not through confrontations, but through compatibility check. Some connections deepen effortlessly because they were already aligned. Others fade because they required constant translation to survive. You're not withdrawing from people, you're withdrawing from friction. Where contact feels simple, you remain present. Where it feels heavy without reason, distance forms naturally. Another sign of this upgrade is how rest changes. Rest no longer feels like recovery from damage. It feels like calibration. You don't collapse into rest. You choose it strategically. And when you return to action, you return clean rather than depleted. This rhythm signals that your system is no longer operating under emergency protocols. Jubilee removes survival mode before it delivers anything else. You may also notice how fewer things feel urgent. Urgency used to be the engine of forward motion. Now it feels imprecise, even intrusive. You are drawn to what is correct, not what is loud. This makes you less responsive to external countdowns and more responsive to internal timing. Internal timing, once trusted, begins to sync with opportunity rather than miss it. Importantly, this upgrade does not make you passive. It makes you harder to manipulate. Stimulation no longer overrides alignment. Fear no longer accelerates your choices. Praise no longer traps you into roles you've outgrown. The absence of reactivity is not emptiness. It is protection through coherence. This is also where creativity shifts. Instead of bursts followed by exhaustion, ideas arrive with structure already inside them. You aren't inspired, you're configured. When expression comes from configuration rather than impulse, it sustains itself. The work doesn't drain you, it feeds you back. As 2026 approaches, this quiet upgrade becomes your default operating system. You won't feel like you're preparing for something dramatic. You'll feel like you're finally operating in a way that makes sense. That sense is the real signal of transition. Not excitement, not fear. Correctness. Remember, ascension was never about rising above the world. It was about descending into clarity. And clarity doesn't announce itself. It stabilizes everything it touches. What's coming next won't feel foreign. It will feel obvious, like something you've been ready for long before you named it. At a certain point, resistance simply stops locating you. Not because you hid, not because you fought it off, but because you no longer vibrate at the frequency it requires to attack. Resistance feeds on urgency, fracture, doubt, and over-identification. As those elements dissolve, resistance loses traction. It doesn't attack less because it respects you. It disappears because there is nowhere to land. This can feel disorienting at first. You may wait for the familiar pushback that never arrives. Old patterns of tension expect opposition to confirm direction. When that opposition fades, direction becomes quieter and far more internal. You start recognizing movement not by force, but by ease that doesn't cost clarity. That ease is not comfort. It's coherence. Practical life reflects this shift in subtle ways. Delays resolve without escalation. Conflicts lose momentum halfway through forming. Plans proceed with fewer dependencies. You're no longer required to defend your pace or justify your trajectory. Things either align or they remove themselves from your field without negotiation. This isn't luck. It's structural compatibility asserting itself. Another sign appears in how you handle uncertainty. Where uncertainty once triggered preparation and control, it now invites observation. You let things reveal themselves instead of extracting answers prematurely. This patience isn't learned. It emerges naturally when fear-based timelines dissolve. You stop trying to secure outcomes because outcome obsession belonged to survival mode. You may also notice something vital. Your emotional range stabilizes. Highs become quieter. Lows lose their depth. Not because you've numbed yourself, but because extremes required internal conflict to sustain them. When alignment replaces conflict, emotions still exist, but they move through instead of trapping you. You feel without being pulled off center. This is why doors begin opening without effort. Not dramatic doors, functional ones. Introductions, permissions, timing windows that don't need follow-up. When resistance leaves, access reorganizes. The world responds to stability more readily than it ever did to force. Stability is trustworthy. Systems, human and otherwise, open to what won't destabilize them. What's critical now is restraint. Do not confuse openness with opportunity overload. Not everything that opens is meant to be entered. Jubilee sharpens discernment so that abundance does not turn into distraction. You choose fewer doors and walk through them fully. That selectivity is part of ascension's grounding, not its glamour. There is also a deeper shift happening beneath behavior. You stop rehearsing explanations. You act without drafting justifications in your head. This is a major sign that identity has decoupled from performance. When actions no longer need a narrative shield, energy returns to the body. Fatigue decreases. Presence increases. As this phase stabilizes, you may feel an unfamiliar quiet confidence. Not assertive, not performative, just steady. Confidence that doesn't need reinforcement because nothing is actively challenging it. This unsettles people who still depend on tension to feel alive. Let them have their process. Yours has moved on. By the time the calendar turns, resistance won't feel like an enemy you defeated. It will feel like an outdated interface you stopped using. You didn't win a battle. You rendered it obsolete. This is what Jubilee actually delivers. Not elevation above the world, but agreement with it, on terms that no longer require defense. And from that agreement, things move faster by moving less. You are no longer being tested for strength. You are being trusted with simplicity, and simplicity, once earned, does not collapse. It clears. What completes this passage is not departure, but integration. The misunderstanding around final human year dissolves here completely. You are not leaving the world. The world is no longer binding you with contracts you didn't consciously sign. Jubilee is not disappearance, it is restoration of proportion. You remain embodied, engaged, responsible, yet no longer coerced by invisible timelines, inherited pressures, or identities built for endurance rather than truth. This is why the last phase feels ordinary, almost deceptively simple. Complexity falls silent not because it was defeated, but because it served its purpose. Once a lesson is learned, repetition becomes noise. Your nervous system registers this before language does. You stop rehearsing. You stop anticipating resistance. You stop living as if understanding must be earned through strain. The body relaxes into accuracy, and accuracy reorganizes the outer world without effort. What changes most is authority. Not power you hold over anything, authority that arises when inner conflict is finished. With no internal debate left to fuel reaction, decision becomes clean. You don't hesitate because there's nothing left to bargain with. You don't rush because nothing is chasing you. You don't perform because nothing is watching for proof. This quiet authority does not demand recognition. It permits continuity. As 2026 unfolds, you'll notice outcomes aligning without ceremony. The right conversations happen without pursuit. The right work appears without exhaustion. Relationships clarify. Some deepen, some conclude without drama. You won't call this manifestation. You'll call it timing finally agreeing with you. That agreement is the practical face of ascension. Ascension here means this. Life stops asking you to prove you belong in it. You already do. The era of qualifying ends. The era of contributing cleanly begins. Contribution doesn't require suffering as credential. It requires presence that doesn't distort under pressure. You've built that presence slowly, quietly, and without announcement. Now it functions. Be careful with one thing only. Do not romanticize what comes next. Romance reintroduces expectation. Expectation reintroduces pressure. Pressure rebuilds contracts that Jubilee just dissolved. Let life remain proportional. Choose depth over volume. Accuracy over speed. Fewer commitments done well will carry you further than many done loudly. You may grieve, briefly, the version of yourself that survived so much to get here. Honor that chapter without dragging it forward. Survival taught you precision. Precision is now free to build. The tools remain. The weight does not. Understand the final truth plainly. Nothing supernatural needs to happen for this to be complete. Completion is already visible in how you relate to the ordinary. You wake without bracing. You decide without negotiating. You move without carrying clocks in your chest. That is ascension lived correctly, not above humanity, but inside it without bondage. If a sign were required, it would not appear in the sky. It would appear in your calendar. Days that hold more space, work that drains less, relationships that cost no aftermath.